with great pleasure that we present a special program featuring a short talk by the Honorable Bainbridge Colby, Secretary of State in the post-war cabinet of Woodrow Wilson, and at present special editorial writer on the staff of the Hearst newspaper. Mr. Colby entered the cabinet early in 1920 and was closely associated with the problems arising from the international war debt situation. This experience and his subsequent close following of the field of international finance enables him to speak with particular authority on his subject of this evening, debt cancellation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Colby.
According to a recent official statement, foreign the United States $11.6 billion. With unexampled generosity, the United States has allowed its debtors 62 years for payment and has reduced the interest from the agreed rate of 5% to such nominal rate as 0.4% per annum to Italy and 1 6/10% to France. These huge loans were the answer given by the United States to the cry of Europe for succor, lest she perish. They were made during the war to enable the nations with whom we were acting in alliance to purchase food and munitions. It may be said without exaggeration that the debtor nations of Europe owe to America's financial support the preservation of their national existence in an hour of black extremity when military defeat and untold internal disasters threaten to engulf and destroy them. Beginning before the signing of the Treaty of Peace and continuing to this moment, the thought has persisted in the minds of our European debtors that some extrication from the American debt must be found. They dare not repudiate. Such a course would be fatal to their credit and to the possibility of securing similar aid in future crises. The only escape is through a voluntary cancellation of the debt by this country, and to that end, an incessant propaganda has been conducted with the support of certain elements among our own population, whose motives, when not confused by misinformation and muddy thinking, are clearly seen to be unpatriotic and dictated by self-interest. What are these debts, and how were they incurred? It is worth a moment to recall the facts. Congress passed the first Liberty Loan Act in April 1917. It provided that the United States government could sell $5 billion of Liberty bonds to the public and use $3 billion of the money thus raised to buy bonds of the Allied government. The principle upon which the act was drawn was that our loans to Europe were to be self-supporting and never a burden to the American taxpayer. Thus it provided that any foreign bond bought by our government should bear the same rate of interest as our Liberty bond. He never concealed his scorn for those heavy pensioners, as he described them, upon useful labor, who rob it of a large portion of its just right. The progressive value of art which has contained corruption, climax year prosperity, would most impress and alarm him. In the last 10 years, the value of farmland has sunk 50%, and the farm laborer's wage is less than 60% of what it was in 1921. Contrasted with the workers upon the land, our public servants, so-called, who include the congressman, the policeman, the school teacher, and all the numerous classes which have their roots in the civil service and are nurtured by politics, have seen their pay rise 110% in the same period. The burden of taxation on the farmer is crushing. His taxes often exceed the yield of his land. How can our condition be sound if wealth is taxed to the consumer of wealth? Business languishes. Have we lost the power to diagnose our ills? Have we reverted to the mentality of the primitive man, who could explain phenomena only by superstitiously citing causes outside the realm of human experience? Something has struck down our trade. There is a stoppage of the outgo and inflow of goods. Can we not see that it is we ourselves who have erected the obstruction which threatens us to ruin? We were warned that the present tariff would bring ruin to our trade. Experienced men of business predicted its destructive results. Those most versed in economic studies and learned in the laws of commerce united in a mass warning against the enactment of the present tariff. But private greed and special interests were more potent in the national legislature than the remonstrances that went up from every quarter of the country. The bill was passed, and the President disappointed not only all his friends, but all anticipation by affixing his approval. What was the result? Just what had been forecast. The nation's prosperity, which is dependent upon its export trade, ceased with the disappearance of that trade. Now we cannot export unless we import, and the erection of an impassable barrier to our import trade carried down with it the possibility, cancellation of the debt to us. But the declaration of the moratorium was hailed in Europe, abandonment by this country of its position. And European economists and statesmen with one accord pronounced the American debt to be a thing of the past. This happy consummation, at least from the European viewpoint, depends, however, upon congressional action. Congress has yet to ratify the moratorium announced by the President in June, and cancellation or revision of the debt lies exclusively within its power. But it cannot be denied that the pressure for cancellation has become ominous and disquieting, due to the fact that the President has been surrounded in recent conferences by representatives of the banking interests of the country, which constitute the spearhead of the propaganda for debt reduction and eventual cancellation. The attitude of the banking interest is easily understood and should deceive no one. The total of American investments in Germany is approximately $3 billion. This great sum includes private investments in equities, bonds, and shares of German industry, industrial loans, loans to public utilities, loans to institutions owned by the Reich and the German state, short-term credit, advances, deposits, and acceptances. These commitments are subsequent in time and subordinate in equity to Germany's reparation obligation. They were made with full knowledge of the underlying public obligations of Germany, and of the fact that while the United States disclaimed being a participant in the reparation payment, our Allied debtors looked upon their reparation receipts from Germany as their sole reliance in meeting their obligations to the United States. Now, there is nothing so repugnant to a banker as to find himself in the position of a subordinate lien-or, particularly when doubt is cast on the prompt payment of what is owed him. There is furthermore a deeply implanted feeling among the business and financial interests that the general government exists primarily for their service and profit. The attitude of our bankers in this respect is not different from that of our tariff-protected manufacturers. What they receive under legal forms or indirectly at the expense of our citizens in general, they regard as gains which are quite legitimate. What therefore could be more characteristic or natural than that the banking interest should naively ask that European debt owed to the United States be subordinated to the European debt owed to the banker? This can be achieved only by the cancellation of Europe's debt to us, with the result that the American taxpayer will have to redeem his own Liberty bonds and thus pay a great part of Europe's war costs in addition to our own. In a war that was Europe's war, primarily, and not ours. Every conceivable argument for cancellation has been made, but all have broken down. At first, we were told that we should cancel the debts out of charity and international goodwill. But charity is not an obligation of government. The money raised by a government is not its own. It is the property of the taxpayer and cannot be diverted from the normal purposes for which taxes are raised. We are told that we were late in entering the war, but every people has the right to decide for itself when, from reasons of self-defense, honor, or other consideration, the cause of war is there. Now cancellation is advocated as good business policy. He accepted the clash of opinion as wholesome. He believed that party policy indicates them criticism and attack, but he fought fair. He was just and never willing that the public interest should be endangered through excess of party zeal or partisan rancour. He would not hesitate to rebuke and oppose an administration which failed to maintain with adequate preparedness the national defense upon sea or land, or faltered in its duty to protect his country's interests at home or abroad. He would excoriate an administration that was responsive to the promptings of the influential, but indifferent to the humble or the helpless. But in times like the present, he would remind us that the presidency is an office the demands of which are almost beyond human faculty. That a president may fail, but he tries. That his deficiencies may demand that he be replaced, but that while his term continues, he cannot be superseded, and in his efforts to serve the country, he should have all the cooperation the country can give him. On the other hand, would he not be impressed with the studied avoidance of vital questions in all the public discussions of today? How can the right be fashioned except on the anvil of debate? How can needed remedies be found if none are proposed? Very differently did Abraham Lincoln face great public issues. The time has come, said he to the Springfield Convention, when these sentiments should be uttered. And if it is decreed that I should go down because of this speech, then let me go down. Linked to the truth, let me die in the advocacy of what is just and right. Has this forthrightness of speech gone out of the American character? Are the men of today, God who is qualified to guide public opinion, afraid of something or somebody? Do they think authority and useful influence in times so critical as the present are to be gained by whispers? Are the stratagems and maneuvers of political committees and party chairmen all that need be invoked to meet our emergence? Ah, no. The call of the times is for the best that is in us. Sustained study, responsible decision, courageous speech, fearless action. America can rescue itself from its difficulties as soon as it decides to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Colby. You have heard the Honorable Bainbridge Colby, who was Secretary of State in the administration of President Woodrow Wilson. Mr. Colby, it is also remembered, was closely associated with President Theodore Roosevelt in the memorable progressive movement which culminated in the nomination of Roosevelt for the presidency. This is Floyd Neal speaking.